Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second day of the opening program of this 2026 Contemporary Arts Biennale. We are starting off, as you already see on the stage, quite strong with a really exciting panel. I encourage you to check out our opening program that has been sent. If you have any questions, my name is Mishael from the Public Programs team. You can always come find me so I can give you a cheat sheet of where to go next and what to do next. And with that, I just want to thank our lovely panelists on the stage, Yussef, Simone, and Dr. Adrian, who are going to take us through, I'm sure, a thrilling conversation today. So I'm going to pass the mic to Dr. Adrian.
Welcome, everybody. It's an honor to be here to moderate this conversation with two people whose practices I have admired greatly. And can I start by saying a massive congratulations on the contribution. I had a chance to see the preview of the exhibition yesterday evening, and I think it's really absolutely a kind of landmark exhibition. It's a kind of game changer. So many extraordinary moments, and hopefully we'll get a chance to unpack some of them during the conversation. Yussef, I know a little bit about your practice. Obviously, Yussef, for his graduation degree show at the Royal College of Art in the Environmental Architecture program, put on one of the most memorable performances, the hybridized sound and kind of spiritual incantations. Similarly, you'll be very familiar with the extraordinary work of Formafantasma. There may be people in the audience who are not familiar with your practices. I'm going to start by asking you both to say a little bit about how your practices came about and how they've evolved.
So me and my partner, we founded our office in 2009. We have been educated as industrial designers, but we have always been interested in not just products and objects, but also the industry within which design perform, and looking at possibilities and problematics of design. Design is a practice, is always asked to find solutions, which is fantastic. I'm totally supportive of solutions making designers and architects and artists, but it's also extremely important to be critical with your position as a designer. And we've always been aware that we as designers, we work on commission. So there is a relationship there where responsibility and ethical responsibility also is shared. And our role is also to establish more complex conversations. So we started with industrial design, and then we understood that the best way for our practice to strive was to expand outside of one side of doing design. So we started doing also independent research work to have a higher degree of autonomy. We started doing interventions in space, exhibition design. And then now we are also working with major international brands where we sometimes also do consultancy. And the more the better. We are trying to. A few years ago, I was feeling very guilty that we do not have an elevator pitch, and now I think we are fully ready to embrace the complexity of our practice and to not have an elevator pitch for what we do.
Yeah, so I would just start off by saying I want to thank all of my ancestors, both seen and unseen, for this opportunity. And yeah, I think for me, I've always been very inspired by the unseen elements in nature. I feel like there's so much energy that is around us, so many kind of synergies that we don't necessarily see. That has always fascinated me to look deeper at the microscopic realm, but also look deeper into cultural rituals, ceremonies, temples, shrines, sacred spaces. So for me, architecture and art has the power to get us to slow down, to stop, to listen, to contemplate. And I've always wanted to somehow focus on not habitation, but focus on contemplation, focus on creating spaces that allow for an inner kind of reflection. And so that has always been kind of the grounding elements of what the studio is interested in making. Even if it's not architecture, it could be material science, it could be sound, it could be chemistry. But all of those things are about looking at multisensory elements that slow us down and help us to connect with nature in a different way in pursuit of maybe seeing something that is divine. So that has been like the process, and really what the studio is fueled by.
I think what's really interesting about both of your practices is that, you know, the objects themselves that you produce are always situated in a much broader context of like forces. There's a kind of force field that works through both of your works, but in different kinds of registers, yeah. In whether it's Formafantasma's kind of investigations into the impact of globalized supply chains or investigations into materiality, and then Yussef, in your work, thinking about, you know, intangible dimensions of like the environment, whether they're kinds of spiritual or social or cultural, I think is really powerful. It's probably helpful for the audience if I invite you both to just also describe your projects as well, because the theme of the exhibition speaks to procession, and I think that's a really very powerful a powerful way of thinking through both of your contributions. Yeah. I think especially in the context of somewhere like Saudi Arabia as well. And I think, you know, when I reflect on my experiences with the Sharjah Architecture Triennial, I think one of the things that you can do here in a different kind of key or in a different kind of register is think about that relationship between ritual and movement and design and, like, you know, aesthetics in a kind of very different way. And so I wonder if you could maybe just also describe the contribution and unpack for us a little bit how it relates to the theme.
Okay, so the work that we contributed was Agba 8-Stone Cave, and it's the brickwork all the way down this street. Agba means ancestor. It means elder. It means senior in Yoruba. My father is from Nigeria. I'm Nigerian as well. And so for me, I think our ancestors are not just humans. They're also rivers, they're also mountains, they're also insects, plants, and animals. So Agba for me it's a reference to the ancestral, but not just human, also non-human. Also this idea or transition or interlude from living and dying is also very important in the work. The textile skins they're symbolic for endangered and extinct species that are on the verge of no longer being with us. I wanted to highlight kind of like just the essence of fragility when it comes to different species, and how we are connected to them and how, I guess, our lifestyles also impact theirs as well. Also, the idea of contemplation, but the idea of being able to zoom all the way into like some of their cellular patterns as well is embedded in the work. And there's a sound element to the work as well, which is recordings of vibrations underneath the soil, also recordings of conversations with plants, and also it's like a symphony of different shamanic drums that were played in Nigeria with different shamans communicating with plants. And all of that was composed to make a sound work of, again, reflection. In Yoruba, in Nigeria, we have this tradition of the talking drum as well. We have this tradition of dance and listening and stillness and even movement transition when it comes to connecting with environmental elements. For instance, you have the Oshun River, you have Yemonja, which is also a water spirit in that way. But all of these entities have different dances, have different songs, have different rhythms that we connect and communicate with them using these different instruments. So I wanted the work to have some form of sonic experience as an activation portal or transition into like a devotional realm for the environment.
I think you absolutely did it. Could you tell us about it has these very beautiful pink clay, like a breeze block bricks around the edge of it.
Yeah, so the breeze rock bricks again are inspired by things that we don't necessarily see every day. They're inspired by the exoskeletons of different beetles that are living in Saudi Arabia. The pink pigment comes from the mountainous regions here. The clay also comes from here. And then there is some cement in the work, small bit of cement in the work for structural reasons. But I tried to use, or actually because it was really a big team, you know? Yeah, I just want to also say, like, it was an amazing team that I had here. In Nigeria, we say it takes a village to raise a child, you know? So I really felt the support of my team back in London, but the team here as well. Yeah, so we tried to use as many local materials as possible.
Amazing. And Simone, I have to say, it's really very rare to see an exhibition bring together a kind of really strong, clear curatorial theme. It's kind of seamlessly with a kind of scenography and an exhibition design. There are so many like really just astonishing moments and some very theatrical moments as well in the project. I wonder if you could just talk through the evolution of it and some of your thinking behind it.
Thank you. Yes, well, in a way, exhibition design, because that's what we've done for this biennial, is maybe a little bit more prosaic than your work. But there is something also really interesting when you work with exhibition design, because it is about almost creating another organism out of all the different contributions of the different artists. And I think in this case, we had a lot of conversations with a curatorial team about the idea of procession. We have also talking about theatricality, but more in the sense of staging. And I can give some examples. For instance, there is the room in the mezzanine in B1, where, for instance, the work is almost staged on a very big platform that has niches, but there's also benches along. And our idea that we discussed with the curatorial team was also to image, for instance, visitors coming, sitting down, and then when you would enter in the room, seeing the work of art as staged together with humans. To, as much as possible, we try to find ways of highlighting the work, but also to create relations and porosity. That's why, for instance, also because of the theme of the biennial, we try to have at least as possible like full walls, but more like screens, partitions, floating partitions, so that works would enter in conversation with one another, and you would have this sense of something more poetic and levitating almost in the space. And the idea of porosity in works for us is extremely important. A lot of contemporary art requires, for instance, the white cube and the persistence of, or the existence of, or the illusion of the monumentality of the white wall. And here we try to avoid that as much as possible. There's a lot of work, for instance, in B5, which is multimedia. And generally, what multimedia's work needs to have an enclosed space where sound is not, it's very precise, it's very protected. But we do think it is really beautiful to see works come together, and as in life, as in bodies, as in the biomes that lives within our bodies, to let the works also enter in conversation, and accepting also the fragility of those works. There's something I feel humane and inviting in that. So that's what we try to do with the work, also making sure that there's also very basic things you do in exhibition design, like, for instance, considering, since it is a procession, very different atmospheres. For instance, in B2, we had the occasion to do something which is very unusual. We could color the floor. and then suddenly to see all these works of art bathing in pink, I think it transformed the work, but it also creates an entire new work of the collection of all the works together. And I think that's what is exciting for us when we do exhibition design, because exhibition design is effective when people forget about it, unless you want to look for it, of course. And it's this sort of subtlety of thinking that for us also allows to understand the works of art in very different ways, which is much more sensual. We very often don't want to know too much about the work when we work in exhibition design. At least at the beginning, we like to just look at the work and understand what kind of space it occupies, how it performs in space, because exhibition, it's a very sensual experience, and we really do respect that. At least we try as much as we can.
I mean, I think you did such an extraordinary job with it. And I think one of the other challenges with the scale of these kind of post-industrial rooms is how you start to create a sense of coherence and evolution and sequence within them. And I thought the use of color was actually really astonishing throughout, because it also generates these different tones within each room. Of course, you get like the reflected light within each room. Also, the lighting conditions shift, and then the scale of the work also needs to fill quite a big space, and yet you still produce these kinds of intimate experiences with it, with smaller works. I'm curious if you could say a little bit more about the use of color, because I think it really pushes back on the idea of the kind of white cube as the site for exhibition making.
Totally. I mean, we cannot push as far as we would want to do, because it's not our role in a way. But we always try as much as possible to use color when we do exhibition design. Because of that, it's a very simple way of opposing that idea of whiteness as the only way of letting the work of art speak, as if the white wall is not already interfering in any, there's no neutrality. There's not, for us, it was very liberating when we started working on exhibition design. The first exhibition that we did was about Caravaggio and Bernini. And so it was historical works. And of course, when it's historical works, you have also some degree of freedom, because artists are not around to tell you what to do. I'm kidding. But we learned that there's a lot of opportunity to recontextualize, rephrase, and to understand that the exhibition is never, it doesn't live in solitude. It's about a collection of different works that becomes an artwork in itself. So the use of color for us, it's very important, because it can create at every different pace. For instance, you can create a moment of intimacy, and then you can create moments of total brightness and joy, and I have to say, we use it very intuitively. Also, it's not that it's not only intellectual. It's just also about, for instance, looking at that space. It's such a gigantic room, and then we look at the work, and then you start to think, in what color should these works bath in? When we knew we could color the floor, we were very excited, because it's very unusual you could do that. And the other things that I think color can do is create not only an architectural experience, but also very different atmospheric mood, and sort of it's a curatorial project at the end of the day, and that's how we use it. But there's no one solutions. We did, for instance, something in Italy once in Prato, where we used an extremely bright color, and it's interesting to see how far you could go, and if the work of art is extremely good, it could hold it, which is really interesting.
Fascinating. I want to loop back to something, Simone, you said at the beginning, about open up to both of you, which is your inability to do the elevator pitch, which I think is somehow is a really like contemporary problem, right? Because people are working between historical disciplines in, I think, important and interesting ways, and sometimes it's difficult to kind of just synthesize that, in a single sentence. Also, because I think practices, by necessity, because of the conditions that we're faced by, have become more complex. And so our idea of the designer or the artist, is kind of enmeshed in a different kind of in a different system. You both work across research, education, and then you have your practices as well. we talk about, like culture as an ecosystem. And for me, when someone says that, I always imagine that they're really just saying, that it has these diverse components. The components are interdependent. But sometimes in a career of a practice, you enter into an already existing ecosystem. Sometimes you need to also generate your own ecosystem, right? You need to create your own conditions. And I wonder if you could speak about that relationship between those different forms of your practice, like how education, research, practice sit together, and what is the ecosystem that you've created around yourselves, and how does it work with respect to, what you do?
I think research is kind of at the core of the practice. Nothing sprouts out of not researching it. So I think research is like the fundamental core pillar, but also curiosity. Being curious about, again, the things that we can't see, being curious about different skills, being vulnerable and being open enough to embrace other cultural understandings, rituals, ceremonies, but also epistemologies, ideology, just being porous. Being porous and open to the environment, also taking walks, being quiet, going swimming, like really connecting with environmental elements. These are core forms of research also, not just reading, not just intellectualizing everything, but actually feeling, and contemplating. So these are important elements. And with teaching, I learned so much from my students, It's like you have to be 12 different people, like in a small studio, but you have to learn how to relate to 12 different people, and they're actually teaching. You're actually learning more about yourself through them in a way. So I think teaching is fundamental also to learning. So that is part of the ecosystem as well.
Yeah, there's a way that
Yeah.
and teaches you to be a good student.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In our case, I think what you just said, it really resonates with our practice too. I think I also really like what you said about research. Our practice, when we can, and especially in the most independent work that we do, it's extremely research-based, and it can be very sort of based on research papers that you can read and books and so on. But the most original thinking always comes from processes of almost of digestions or conversations with people in the office, and from and actually from making. So from executing work, the most original thinking arises. It's never, the knowledge of others is helpful to it's almost like food. But then work is a way of processing ideas, I think. And we have been teaching for a very long time, and then we added also a department. Now for a while we stopped, but the reason why we started teaching, it's because we felt that that some of the questions or things we're interested in, they were way bigger than us. And that there are questions related, for instance, to ecologies or what you do in the planet in this moment when you are a designer and you produce things, are things that we wanted to share with others and to discuss with others and to make more like a collective effort. And so that was the main reason why we started teaching. And now we are in a moment instead we felt that it was important to go back to our own office, which is in any case a group of people, and foster that. But I think I think it's very important and relaxing and encouraging when you realize that that you can open up your struggles to others and your ideas to others and to involve others and to let others pick on your work, for instance, what you do, and let others go with it. It's very difficult because, for instance, when we're teaching design education, we realize how much, even there, the idea of the author is still central. So students had really a struggle in understanding that you could, in a good sense of the word, appropriate the works of others as long as you push it forward. It's not about stealing, it's about recognizing and continuing. But we didn't manage in the years we were there to actually to achieve what we wanted, but to to let work become a collective effort and not an individual effort.
I think there's a really strong conversation happening at the moment around, you know, that exactly those kinds of issues. No, and like there's a way of understanding shifts in the field. No, that sense of kind of porosity or vulnerability, and also the interdependence of things with each other is super important. And it raises, I think, something which is a strong theme between both of your practices, which is the idea of material. You know, and of course, this is another very live conversation with respect to exhibition making as well, in terms of its sustainability, within architecture especially, you know, for similar reasons. And yet both of you have really engaged with, I think, the challenge that we have at the moment, which is, you know, these globalized, industrialized supply chains, mass production of material, the waste it generates, the embodied carbon it kind of consumes, but you position yourselves in different kinds of ways with relationship to that. And so I think it'd be really terrific, and this could be the last question, and we can open it up to the audience, to hear a bit about how you think about material in terms of its meaning, its importance, you know, where it could come from, what it should do in a work, what can happen afterward, after the work is concluded. Like, I think there's some nice things to explore here.
Yeah, I would just also want to say one thing about the previous question about ecosystem and education. I think for me as well, there's also always the last kind of layer of education. The works, I feel like they're also teachers in the sense that I love the idea of collaborating with the environment. Like, I feel like the sun is my collaborator. I feel like insects, snakes, you know, butterflies, plants, the wind even, they're always my collaborators as well. So for instance, with the breeze blocks, the wind is constantly caressing, constantly touching your face. All of the shadows coming from the sun, that also, the sun is also dancing in the work. It has a presence in the work. So that is also a form of learning. For the works that are installed in the Amazon forest, I mean, the plants have completely taken them over, you know, the skins of the skins of the works. So I feel like seeing the different organisms inside these works, hearing their sounds again, or seeing, I don't know, small insects lay eggs on the fabrics and then something else happens and something else. All of that is also a learning experience. So the work is constantly in this feedback loop, you know, and we're archiving that process. So that's part of the ecosystem. As far as materials are concerned, yeah, curiosity, like really being open about research and experimenting with different types of skins and materials, different smells that can be embedded in different cellulose skins. That's something that we're researching, but also using natural fibers like jute, cotton, linen, and also experimental fibers, plant fibers that are stronger than steel, but based on the way that they are knitted, or the threads and the gauges are knitted and woven together and twisted together, they present, you know, really, really strong fibers. So fiber research is very important. And normally I'm using natural fibers, but in this work specifically, I wanted to use recycled ocean waste to connect with, you know, the different kind of crisis that the sea turtles are experiencing in the Red Sea. So again, trying to adapt materials to specific crises, but also specific locations, specific cultural meanings as well, has always been very important to the way that we produce different works.
When we started our practice and we were working more closely to objects design, we were really trying to find more sustainable solutions working on a material level, sort of finding ways of resolving ecological issues on a really within materiality. But then we understood that the question is, as you said, much more about supply chain and infrastructure. And in our practice, every once in a while, we do one big research work. We did at least 3 throughout the years of our practice. And the images now are about a work. This is images of the presentation of the work in Norway. which was about wool and wool production. There we were particularly interested also in the relationship with the animal and looking at how the biological evolution of the animal intersected also the evolutions of technology. Very often in museums of, for instance, of applied art or design, you see the object, you talk about processes, industrial processes, but you never see, for instance, the animals that participate in their production, or the other species that participate in its production.
So do you mean that the sheep were actually evolving in relationship to the tech? So as the technologies changed, they tried to breed the sheep to produce wool that would support
it is that, but there's something also quite poetic when evolutionists don't really know what happened specifically, but when men and mouflons started, which is the wild version of the sheep, started to live in close proximity, let's say, for a very long time, the idea is that humans started to breed the mouflon to become a sheep to produce more wool. But in fact, there is not proof that that's how it happened. It could also be that the two species evolved together. We evolved together with sheep because we went to, for instance, parts of the world we would never inhabited because we could cover our own bodies. They have been fed by us, they have been protected. And by doing that, we also started a relationship with other wild animals, with wolves that became dogs, that helped us guard the sheep. And then when we started, moving with sheep as humans, in the office at one point, we started questioning, were we following the sheep? Or were the sheep following us? Because at the end of the day, as shepherds, we take them to high mountains when it's hot, and we take them to valleys when it's colder and so on. But the industry grew out of proportion, and it's a story of colonialism, of exportations of sheep in Australia and so on. But when we do works like this, and then they are often presented in the museum space, it's all about understanding the infrastructure. And then we try to take that and apply it back to possible clients we have. We're developing a work now with Maharam, trying to take some of these questions into actions with our industrial producers we work with, which is a huge challenge, and it's works that takes, for instance, 4 years, and it's rarely you can find partners you can do these kind of endeavors, and we don't know yet how the outcome will be, but it will be a series of works more locally produced with different flocks across the world, produced, let's say, locally in the main markets and then distributed there. We're also working on a film documentary to show the stories of materials, animals, and humans that are involved in that process.
Amazing. I mean, I think after COVID, everyone also realized that, with this kind of shock that was registered on global supply chains, that actually the supply chain needs to become a kind of space of intervention and redesign as well. And so that's a really inspiring project, and good luck. I'm going to turn it over to the audience to see if there are any questions. Do we have a roving mic? We've got a roving mic over here. Excellent. Just at the front.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I have a question about the exhibition design and sort of like working against the white cube. And I'm interested in your relationship in working with the curators. And was the work positioned first and that you worked with that positioning, or did you collaborate with them in terms of positioning the work? And a second question, it has to do with the lighting. Was that your idea to move from the light to the dark, or was that the lighting designer?
Thank you for all the questions. Well, first of all, this is, of course, a group work, and I must acknowledge that. We work on the exhibition design in our office, but there has been also Sami, who has extensively worked, curators, of course, informing enormously all the process. So it's a collective work. And when I talked about the white cube, it was not the kind of conversation we had in this specific occasion, but it's more our interest, I would say, because when you start working with the exhibition design, inevitably you face that question. What is neutrality? How is my, when you work with the exhibition design, you have to ask yourself, how am I going to interfere in the work? And so when you visit a museum, you start questioning, is a white wall not interfering in the work? Of course it is interfering with the work. It's one way of reading that work. It's just a convention. It's, and we know why it exists. It's historical reasons and so on. so when you start working with exhibition design, the conversation is much more organic and fluid. So it's not that it went in parallel actually. So at the beginning when you started working, not the curators nor us, we have an idea what the exhibition will look at the end, but you start to see the subject of the exhibition, you start to see some works, and so upon that you start to think about what kind of materials do we work with. What kind of atmosphere do we want to have? And you start to work on one space. And by that, it grows organically. So the positions of the work went together with the exhibition design, but once informed the other and the other way around. It's not one-way relation, I would say. Regarding the light design, I think that we have been working with an extraordinary light designer, which especially for Biennale, it's extremely good, I think. That has been, informing and helping us a lot, and the curators, I think, in this process, we have been suggesting some sort of lighting across some of the spaces, and then of course he added his own expertise in that, because we're not experts of that. We design lighting actually, but we're not experts of how light performs in space. So he has been extremely helpful in that, but there has been very specific decision, for instance, because it's a procession, we also had different spaces to think about lighting and exhibition design and positioning of artworks also according to the space you were in. If you think about it, there is also questions of rhythm across the exhibition. I think it starts quite pristine and calm, and it ends up more fragmented and chaotic, but I think that's extremely good. I think it's also good to have this sort of evolution across the show. I think it's impossible at this moment in time to end an exhibition with a pristineness. I think it would be weird, considering what is happening in the world. So I think that's the right note to end the show, at least according to me, but I'm sure also, hopefully also for the curators. But again, it's a group work.
Thank you. We're also in a space designed by Formafantasma, when there are some Formafantasma designed pendant lights and wall lights on the side of the room. So I think this might be one of the first days that this space has been used. Is maybe second day. Okay. We have time for maybe one more question.
Hi, thank you. It's also about the scenography. Sorry. There's the notion it's not a white cube, so there's no color, but also it's a bit more a raw question because it's about the materials. When we approach the panels, I guess it's also because it's made of fabric, there's like kind of a tiny bit of acoustic absorptions in it. I wanted to know if it was something thought through or it was a result of just using this material, and how do you integrate this kind of like sound design, even though it's not sound projected, but the sound made by the people in the space?
Well, so we use textile a lot when we do exhibition design. It's something we really love. It is also because it allows you to construct very big surfaces, but with a very inside there is a light structure of wood, so you can do a lot with it, and it has that quality. Also, what is beautiful about it is if you chose a color, it's never as dull as if you paint a surface of one color. Textile has color is more vivid and more more deep. Exactly. And so it's because of all these qualities we started using textile extensively when we do exhibition design. And so, yes, so that was something we were aware of, but there's many qualities of textile that pushed us to go in that direction when we started using it. Also, there's something beautiful to, in a way, how the modules are constructed. It's like a frame as you would construct a painting. So there is also something beautiful to start from this very simple gesture of stretching textile on a structure. And with that module, construct also, in some cases, quite monumental surfaces, but still have this lightness, which is never monumental as a plastered wall that pretend to be a concrete wall, So it is also about this, it's real in a way. It's not pretending to be something else.
Thank you so much. Can we please put our hands together for Yussef and Simone, and for the curators of this extraordinary show, Nora and Sabir.